Welcome back to the DCS Sitrep for more news and information on the world's premier combat flight simulator for the home PC. It's called DCS World. It's brought to us by Eagle Dynamics, and once again, I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog. This week, we're talking volumetric weather, which is back on the discussion board as Eagle Dynamics brings us a breakthrough in global weather conditions using ray marching. We'll talk about updates from Aerges, the pending campaign Arctic Thunder from Reflected Simulations and Baltic Dragon, and exciting news about the supercarriers plane directors which are coming in this month's patch. Well, let's start with that topic right now, the plane directors, and it's a topic that has been in the works for a while now as ED fleshed out both the mechanisms for generating the AI logic for handoffs of aircraft maneuvering on the carrier deck. They also had to iron out the logic to ensure the directors had enough wherewithal to avoid being run over by planes maneuvering, which actually is a legitimate hazard on deck. It is regarded, after all, as one of the most dangerous places to be during flight operations, and there's tons of videos out there of some miraculous survivals, including the one where a deck crew member was sucked up into the vent, or the intake at least, of an A6. So yeah, definitely a very, very dangerous place to be, especially at night when your visual acuity is significantly reduced. So what's ED saying for this supercarrier update? Well, when it was originally released, it included a rich set of deck crew and animations that mimic the process of taxiing onto the catapult and launching. In the next update, they are delighted to announce that added feature of plane directors, yellow shirts, who precisely marshal aircraft from their parking spaces to the catapult. This usually involves multiple plane directors passing control from one key position to the next, ensuring precise, hazard-free taxiing of the aircraft to the designated catapult. After landing, the same new director system will marshal players and AI aircraft back to their designated parking locations. So really cool concept there. A great deal of immersion being added for that experience of being directed to launch and then the post-recovery as well. So a neat idea, and obviously one that has taken them quite a long time. And the reason for that was the process of creating this for single player was a challenging task given the myriads of ways the process can be interrupted. However, the multiplayer aspect was even more complex than ever contemplated given the numerous ways multiple human players on the carrier deck could in fact break the system. This led, they said, to more than 4 times the development initially budgeted for this particular feature, and they wish to apologize for the delay and hope that we enjoy the experience, which I think we will. Now, regarding the John C. Stennis, they said here, remember, a lot of the features that we saw are part of the supercarrier introduction and follow-up development. So with regards to the Stennis, it is available as both a free aircraft carrier and as part of the supercarrier module. So this allows the Stennis to be used by pilots that own and do not own the supercarrier module. For now, and to maintain this compatibility, deck crew will not be supported for this particular aircraft carrier. So they're working on a solution to resolve this in the future. So as you heard, the holdup for the feature was the practicality of getting the system to work seamlessly, particularly in multiplayer. Nonetheless, I'm very, very excited to see this in game. It's going to add another layer of realism to the supercarrier, which a lot of you have complained was seemingly lacking much attention from the ED team. Obviously, they were working on this particular feature. It's actually a kind of a complex little module in many respects. It has a lot of moving parts involving AI logic in a pretty confined space. And sometimes, as people have pointed out, this can go awry. Sometimes the crew don't recognize you, and so you can't launch from the aircraft carrier, that kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing this in action from the Airboss station and watching the directors move aircraft around on the deck, seeing what it looks like from a bit of an Eye of God perspective. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Overall, I think this is a really exciting move, and anything that enhances naval ops, especially with some aircraft like the A6, as mentioned before, coming to the game sometime in the near future. Again, it's going to make it an exciting one, not to mention the A7 as well. So lots of things to look forward to, hopefully in the nearer future, not the distant future, which sometimes seems to happen with the modules you want the most.
Campbell 01, verify your Eagles 40,000. Campbell, affirmative. Nice.
Well, let's turn to a slightly different topic here from Argus, who are pleased to update us on their improvements to both their Mirage, F1, C101, and also the progress that they have been making on the F104, which I know a lot of you are really excited about. There was a lot of buzz in the community when Argus announced that they were going to do that beloved aircraft. So according to the newsletter, the Mirage F1 MFD and HUD symbology, as well as their respective avionics logic, are in an advanced state of development. Much work is being done to polish the F1 systems in addition to fixing bugs reported by the community. Attention has also been made to the C101, in order to keep it up to date and bug free. That's an aircraft I haven't really gelled with. I did try it, didn't really float my boat. So I mean, kind of interested to see what they've done to that aircraft to keep it up to speed. Now, there has been an overhaul of the code structure to allow more effective coding and feature sharing between the F1 and the upcoming 104. So that's good news. Research continues on radar picture rendering and physics improvement. The resulting technology is also expected to be used for the F104. Now, based on the video I saw from Argus, it looks like they are redoing the radar. So interesting stuff there. Now, coding of the F104 flight model and general aircraft systems is complete, they say here, as well as initial flight model validation. So this includes things like the engine, the hydraulics, the electrics, fuel controls, armament, and miscellaneous systems. Avionics systems and integration with the cockpit animations and inputs is currently in progress. So that's pretty good indication of some pretty far along development and very exciting news. Additionally, here they say the F104 external model and cockpit textures are the result of a thorough research that included laser scanning. The next step will be the creation of the set of liveries. So check out that video. I'll post a link to that in the comments section below, or at least in the description below, so that you can check that out. They did talk about a little bit more detail in terms of what they're doing with regards to updating the exterior modeling, more reflections, more texturing, just more realism in general. So really exciting move there from Argus. And again, the F104 will be a very, very popular module for those who love that Cold War era and that particular aircraft. So stay tuned for more on that as we get closer, hopefully, to some sort of release date, which is likely to be 2025 based on what I'm seeing because of the advancement. Of course, we've got quite a few projects that haven't come this year, which will also be stacked up into 2025, which I'm hoping is going to be a more positive year than this one, but we'll see how we go. Again, it's a lovely little aircraft, that F1. And I'm pleased to see also them taking a leaf out of Heat Blur's work on the Phantom 2. This is, again, something that was mentioned in their video regarding systems failures and linking systems failures. So again, it's a neat step in development. It's one of those aircraft I haven't really had time to fly as often as I would like. It's just like so many modules in the game. You can tinker a little across the lineup, or you can deep dive into one study sim and spend hours getting to grips with just that one aircraft. It's one of the beauties of DCS World. You can take it quite a long way with just one airframe, and also one of the challenges for my mind, because sometimes there just isn't enough time to really learn more than a couple of aircraft reasonably if you work full-time and have a life. So yeah, it's both cool and one of the challenges of a study sim like this. Not a bad thing though. All right, as we saw last week, Edie plugged the Arctic Thunder campaign from Baltic Dragon and Reflected Simulations, which again I'm also looking forward to. Remember, it's going to allow you to fly missions for both the FA-18C and the F-16C, which of course are both Eagle Dynamics products. It's all set on the Kola Peninsula, which is an Orbix product. You will need that map as well as the campaign to be able to fly. It's 10 missions, remember, with a variety of roles and tasks. So check out last week's video for a little bit more information. They reiterated what they did last week on revealing that this is coming in this next patch, which is pretty cool.
43-1 looking for direct air on IT.
3-1, anchor 61 Bravo, 015, 58, 25,000, 6 until.
Charlie 3-1, confirm clear direct.
Well, let's turn now to volumetric weather, which is a highlight feature of this week's video in the Sitrep and also from the newsletter. It's a big development breakthrough in weather systems for DCS World, I think, which, if I'm reading the white paper correctly, on this topic. It's going to be a revolutionary improvement to the visual representation of weather in a flight simulation video game, particularly around the area of, again, cloud representation, but also particularly here the fog and the dust representation, which we're going to talk about the history here a little bit and how they have come to this step in the development process, again, which is a really, really cool one. So according to the newsletter, they said here that the next update will feature substantial enhancements to DCS weather, in particular a new state-of-the-art fog and dust rendering system. This is highly immersive as a solution which took more than 8,500 man-hours to develop. It allows both automatic and manual fog generation and accounts for sensor and AI line of sight blocking, which is really cool. It is calculated with the future spherical Earth in mind and can be highly variable based on density and altitude. It supports self-shadowing, blends with clouds, and is fully animated with moving cloud banks. Great stuff. Scenes from the early morning and evening hours are particularly convincing, they say here, and offer a surprisingly realistic atmosphere. And they encourage us to read the white paper on volumetric weather white paper, as it's called. Well, let's take a deep dive then into the white paper and see what we can deduce from it, starting with some DCS history on the graphics. So they say here that an integral part of any flight simulator is the sky. As developers, we treat all possible atmospheric phenomena with special care and attention, striving to implement them as realistically and effectively, or at least efficiently, as today's hardware allows. Over the long history of the company's development, the implementation of clouds has been radically updated several times, which we've seen a few years ago with the clouds that we saw is a huge step in the right direction for creating realistic skyscapes. It's been fantastic. Now, the first iterations, though, were based on particle systems where each cloud was represented as a separate object. On the one hand, this allowed for relatively easy distribution of clouds across the space and the use of this information in game logic to block sensor visibility. However, from a rendering standpoint, this was an inefficient technique with a host of problems and disadvantages, including sorting issues and rotating intersecting particles when turning the head, especially in VR. And you can sort of see that sometimes when you're flying around, clouds kind of spinning in weird ways and just kind of spoiling the effect that you were actually maneuvering around the clouds or in the clouds. Now, additionally, they said it's virtually impossible to effectively describe and render huge multi-layered cloud formations with particles, formations that cast shadows on everything and themselves and adequately account for light scattering and attenuation. So some pretty sophisticated visual representation there, which is hard to do. The new approach, however, involved a complete abandonment of particle systems in favor of ray marching techniques. So what's ray marching? Well, in this approach, clouds no longer exist as separate objects, but are represented as a continuous volume where the cloud density is known at every point in space. To render such a volume, it's necessary to traverse this volume along the line of sight in each pixel on the screen and compute the exact integral of cloud illumination and opacity. So this approach means that it allows for the efficient resolution of cloud self-shadowing, ground, and all objects. It enables the implementation of a physical model of light scattering similar to that used in their sky model, and it facilitates the convenient description of large volumes of clouds of different types. So some pretty cool stuff there, and if you look up ray marching, it's a whole topic in itself. It's a pretty fascinating one, a little bit nerdy, but one that I find interesting, and why they've used this technique and how it's going to solve these representations of weather in this update and likely, of course, in future updates. So again, let's get back to the paper here. So they said way back in 2014, the first version of ray march clouds was developed. They were single layered. They calculated for a flat Earth with noticeable limitations in quality and draw distance. Self-shadowing was calculated with significant restrictions. A global coverage map was supported, allowing for the drawing of fronts. However, considering the power of video cards at the time, seems okay, so we're talking 10 years ago, they couldn't integrate them into the rendering frame budget in a way that satisfied most of the users, so who were using at that time a wide variety of video cards from different vendors. Those who have been with us for a long time might remember how in one of the patches, volumetric clouds were drawn during sunset on the main screen instead of the background, with the camera gliding along the edge to imitate flight. Feedback made it clear that the time for new clouds had not yet come and the project was postponed for better times. This didn't do the job. Time passed, computational power grew, and new challenges arose. So it became clear that single-layer clouds, they just were no longer sufficient. They didn't allow for the description of multi-layer configurations or for different types of clouds, including cumulonimbus, to exist within one volume. Supporting a spherical Earth became a priority for them as well. Remember, that's something that they are working on, a global kind of map, which is going to introduce some other issues as well. But anyway, in 2021, which we kind of hinted to before, a new volumetric cloud system was released, written almost from scratch. And this system includes, it's calculated again for a spherical Earth that allows up to 16 independent layers. It has a drawing radius of 400K, which can be increased even further without significant loss of quality, K being kilometers there, excuse me, and features highly advanced and efficient mechanisms for integrating lighting and composing clouds on the screen. Has self-shadowing that is no longer limited to a small radius. Clouds on the horizon cast shadows and across the entire map. Ensures all transparent objects and effects blend adequately with the clouds. It eliminates the problem of sorting effects and glass with particle-based clouds. It incorporates rain and snow into the system. It implements most optical effects manifested on clouds, such as rainbows, moonbows, halos, glories, and fog bows. As of today, not all cloud capabilities have been realized. Some of the main directions for future development, they say, include significant advancement of the cloud generator, support for new types of clouds, implementation of lighting effects, improving rendering and lighting quality along with optimization, ability to describe cloud fronts and local formations, dynamic simulation of clouds, utilization of real weather data, providing a cloud editor interface, and support for optical sensors of world objects. So lots of things to consider there. Definitely that introduction of really realistic clouds back in 2021 there was a massive improvement to the game. Really did bring the whole environment alive. It really so much improved the game. Visually, it was fantastic. And yeah, it seems hard to believe. It's easy to become comfortable with these things and become a little bit blasé or contemptuous, if you like, for some of the development that's going on in the game, because it's something that you can take for granted as just being there. But if you've been with the franchise for perhaps as long as I have, you can remember just how basic some of the clouds were prior to these more recent updates, which if they implement this correctly, which it sounds like they're going to, is going to be a very, very big game changer. So let's turn to the fog problem as they describe it. And this has existed in DCS since the beginning. So it's calculated for a flat Earth. It does not adequately account for atmospheric light, and it fits poorly into scene lighting. I've never been impressed with the dust and fog. I played around with the settings a few times just to create missions and things, just for filming or whatever else I'm doing. And then you go to add in some fog to it or some dust, and depending on the lighting combination that you have, especially early morning, you tend to get this weird opacity that doesn't quite gel with the look that you're going for. And so I've always been disappointed with that. So they've said, to continue here, it does not receive the shadows from new clouds and it doesn't blend with them. And that's one of the problems. You can sort of see the separation of, again, this like soup at the bottom, which almost seems hard. And then you've got these really nice clouds that they have implemented. And as I said, it doesn't gel very well. So it's always continuous and homogeneous. So again, that's one of the reasons why it doesn't look very realistic. And it lacks self-shadowing and it doesn't blend with the rain volume. Again, it's sort of, it just looks fake, I guess is the easiest way of describing it. So the dust effect is implemented similarly, but as a separate effect, and it doesn't blend correctly with the new clouds or receive shadows from them. So it just looks artificial, right? Moreover, the dust effect currently doesn't affect the sense of visibility, which is a critical feature of realism in the game. We need that, again, to fool us into, again, thinking we're in real jets just for a period. Because the new clouds are calculated for a spherical Earth and the current fog for a flat one, it's impossible to adequately combine them. So this necessitated the implementation of new fog in the context of a spherical Earth. Really cool. To make the fog fully compatible with the new clouds, it was logical to make it part of the system. What seems like a simple task, though, is extremely non-trivial when attempting to render fog in a single pass along with clouds. So again, we're talking some pretty sophisticated calculus here to create this kind of scenery. Storing information about fog density in the same volume as cloud data here. So again, non-trivial when attempting to render fog in a single pass, along with the cloud storing information about fog density in the same volume as cloud data. And I had a thought in there which disrupted the flow of that sentence, so I apologize. Okay, so this is due to the incomparable data densities required to describe clouds and fog. Describing low and dense fog requires a very fine voxel size, whereas a significantly larger voxel suffices for a small cloud. So you can see kind of what's happening here in terms of the way in which cloud and moisture works, right? So moreover, even today, the ray marching techniques for clouds is quite heavy, and the entire cloud frame isn't rendered completely in one pass. So instead, temporal projection is used, allowing for the reuse of cloud samples drawn in previous frames. The technique isn't perfect. It introduces a range of problems and artifacts which are exacerbated when attempting to render thin and dense fog against the ground. All this poses a serious challenge to developers. To date, they haven't been aware of any successful implementation of a unified volumetric cloud system capable of rendering fog in one pass without significant performance loss. So that's the challenge. That's the background to the issues that they've encountered when implementing these weather systems. Now, the new fog, despite all the development challenges, they managed to find a truly state-of-the-art solution. And this is what I'm really, really excited about. And all of the aforementioned problems that we just discussed have been resolved. So the new fog implements a new fog reconstruction previously undocumented on the internet. So they've had some sort of breakthrough. I don't know who's responsible for this, but bravo, especially if, as promised, it comes to fruition here in the game. It's fully compatible with cloud shading and is an integral part of it. Really exciting. It's calculated on a spherical Earth. In other words, it's going to interact with the environment properly. That offers fog quality that is virtually identical and stable. It can be extremely dense and very low. It receives shadows from clouds and the ground. It accounts for self-shadowing. It blends with the clouds. It can have any color and correctly blends with the clouds. Again, really cool. So this is where your sunsets and early morning sunrises are going to impact that. It's fully compatible with the rain volume. Again, really cool. And it can be inhomogeneous. Again, really cool. And it can be animated. And they've implemented this capability. It has a maximum thickness of 5 kilometers and can be used to simulate airborne particulates. So that's, in simple terms, some sophisticated shit. The dust effect is now implemented based on the new fog and is fully compatible with shading. Like fog, the dust effect now affects sensor visibility, which wasn't the case in previous versions of DCS. Now, one of the reasons I like this is because it's really going to bring maps, desert maps in particular, where you have dust. And we're not talking dust storms here yet, I don't think, but where you have dust in the atmosphere, that's going to be particularly useful for those desert maps to create that sense of haze that you would expect, again, depending on weather conditions, humidity, that kind of stuff. So again, I'm very curious. As a slight weather geek, I grew a little bit more respect for weather once I did my drone pilot training, my Part 107 with the FAA, to get the FAA license, because they spend quite a lot of time talking about the impact of weather and why it's important, particularly in the area of the storm clouds and storms in general and fronts coming through, and how this can impact your considerations for flight planning and what it does visually to the world around us. So again, translating all of that real world stuff into a video game is, as you can tell, is extremely complex, and that's why we're having this interesting discussion. So again, getting back to those desert maps, I'm very excited to see how they do this, and if it impacts visual and sensor effects, or capacity at least, they've achieved something really special if they pull this off. So again, we'll have to wait and see. Now, in the Mission Editor's weather interface, you can set fog animation or choose the auto mode. Currently in automatic mode, fog appears at sunset and dissipates after sunrise, which is what you would expect, right? As the Earth heats up, then you get wind and movement of air, moisture burn off, so on and so forth. So the fog disappears and moves, or retreats into areas with low ground, or where there's hills and stuff like that. It can sink and do all sorts of cool things. So this mode will be significantly developed in the future to consider weather conditions. precipitation, cloud density, temperature, humidity, etc. So some of those things that I mentioned may still be coming, like the humidity effects. It's just the beginning, they say. So this is really cool. We've also added a fog scripting API, which allows you to animate the fog in any way and tie it to events. So this is going to be really cool for mission creators and campaign creators who are looking to embellish the game in a way that hasn't previously been possible. So all of this synchronizes, they say, over the network, enabling fog animations to be part of network missions. So multiplayer, in other words. Really, really cool. Really, really cool. I'm so excited to read this. As I'm thinking about it now, looking at it, I read this blurb last night, and I was thinking about how cool it is. But reading it again, it still is just blowing me away. It's really... the nerd in me is really getting triggered right now. Okay, now let's talk about this, the last portion of this, the volumetric light. So lighting, of course, is a huge component of this. So light scattering is one of the key features of clouds and fog, naturally, creating a glow effect around light sources. We've also advanced in this direction and have now added support for volumetric light sources. This is cool. Fog and clouds are now illuminated by various light sources depending on their density. Moreover, clouds and fog now receive and scatter light from the ground. You can notice how clouds and fog are illuminated by city lights, making night lighting look even more realistic. This blows my brain, man, because I just suddenly realized too, as I'm reading this, the possibilities for cinematic recordings for those of us that love that stuff. It's just open up a whole new window for potentially outstanding videos using DCS World that would rival, CGI stuff that you see, but being done in live, being done in game. So it's really kind of just, again, blowing my mind. Sorry to be so dramatic here, but yeah, it's really, as I said before, it's really triggering the nerd in me. So these realizations as I'm reading it again, live to you now, it's a really triggering me to think about all sorts of interesting things and interesting concepts for the use of the game in a variety of different ways, not just for those mission planners that we mentioned, but also, as I said, for cinematic components as well. I can't wait to see this if it's implemented at the end of this month. Well, fingers crossed it is. Okay, so a very detailed introduction into some, as I said, pretty complex calculations for visual effects in the game, which I suspect, like when the first iterations of Realistic Cloud was introduced a few years back, is going to be a big game changer visually. Now, all of this matters because despite our advances in aircraft technology, remember that weather is still a huge consideration when it comes to flight ops. Despite some conspiracy theorist claims out there to the contrary, in recent times, humanity has yet to tame the weather, which is why you see in some of the better mission planning data for content creators, say, for example, Sedlo, who does some fantastic missions, METAR and TAF and NOTAM reports are in those briefings, because pilots have to know what the weather is going to do and whether or not, when they return, the weather is suitable for them to land, or if it's going to cause influences, particularly in the area of gas usage and possibly even having to go to divert airfields because suddenly a dust storm springs up, suddenly it's fogged in, or whatever else is going on outside of the threat environment. So being shot out of the sky is certainly your top priority, but inclement weather is also the other enemy of pilots operating combat aircraft. So it sounds kind of almost perfunctory as a natural consideration, but it is actually a huge component of flight training, getting pilots aware of the weather around them, because it can be a killer. All right, so visually, this is going to be fantastic, especially with the fog being illuminated by lighting and strobes on towers and nighttime effects as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that pans out, if we're going to see more glow effects. Really just, again, there's so many thoughts running through my head right now. Again, the dust playing a part in similar effects. Again, I'm particularly interested in the visual blocking and sensor detection blocking issues. So I can't wait to see how all of this comes together, and of course future iterations that they are talking about here or have mentioned. One aspect though not mentioned in this paper, which is a secondary thing that I'm curious to see how they implement, and I don't know whether, how far along they are or whether this is going to be a thing, but is the influence of things like wind and turbulence, which you'd expect to see around storm clouds, which, as most pilots will tell you, are best avoided, especially those big cumulonimbus clouds that are forming or have formed. Wind obviously will, nonetheless, as a visual experience, have influences on fog and dust. So again, this is really, really promising stuff and will most undoubtedly enhance the map experience and the atmosphere of maps, which we talked a little bit about a few weeks ago, about what makes a great map. And some of this is the visual experience that the core engine can provide to create realistic world environments in a manner that I hope will deliver both fantastic visual experiences for those still using 2D and track IR, etc., and even more fidelity, I think, for those of us who are using VR. Now, the bottom line is, and as I always say, the proof will be in the pudding, but this, if it's implemented as described, is going to be a huge push in the direction of how far ED can take the game engine, which continues actually to impress given its age and continues to surprise, again, given its age. So for all of the criticism that ED gets, again, if they're able to implement this, I think this could be one of the biggest updates that they've introduced, visually at least, and how it's going to enhance our flight experience is pretty amazing. So fingers crossed. Stay tuned for more on that. And I think this really does bring us to the end of this week's Sitrep. It's been a long one and an exciting one. So stay tuned for, I guess, the next week or so. And if this patch is introduced, just quickly, news not covered, check out Mover's video on revisiting the F-16. He was full of praise for it. He saw some areas that he felt needed tweaking, but he said he didn't want to see tweaks done if it reduced the work already being done. He said it's looking pretty amazing. It's behaving very realistically. A couple of, like I said, a few things he wanted to see tweaked, but not at the expense of the things that have been improved. So always useful to have former, even current, of course, from real pilots provide their experience and knowledge and impressions as to how well things are being implemented and mimicked, recreated in this game. It's huge kudos for the work that Eagle Dynamics and DCS are putting together. All right, as I said, that'll do. Let me know what your thoughts are on the white paper and any of the topics that we've discussed today in the comments section below. Thanks for tuning in again. Thanks for all the support, the subscriptions, and the comments, the shares, and all that stuff. It's really helping the channel chug along. We'll see you next time on the DCS Sitrep.
Traffic bar 045, 15, 17,000.
3-1's pushing. 3-1's climbing to 230.
Greedy 5-1, left 020. Greedy 5-1, left turn 020. Greedy 5-1, climb to Angels 36. Greedy 5-1.